Okay, so what's up, guys? Today I'm gonna try a different uh, method of screen recording. The other one caps me at 15 minutes. I already recorded a video, but I'm gonna try this just to see what happens and see how I like it. Um, I think it'll turn out alright. It'll be nice to not be capped on time. So, today Uh, we did some studying. Today we also had some car troubles. Hella car troubles. Okay? Like, oh my god. I had my car died in the middle of work, and I had to go and get a tow, and I just had a lot of stuff happen. So tomorrow morning I'm going to the mechanic to get that sorted out and hopefully get that all fixed. It's extra frustrating because I got my battery replaced. I thought I had this issue solved last Wednesday, but it was not solved apparently. I was able to go back home for Christmas, but as soon as I was on shift, like it died, or like after my first couple hours of work, it died, and it was just super frustrating. So, anyways, I got back home. I got some studying in, which I'm going to share with you. Very excited about. So, today, what we studied, I went through some of my course materials from my certification courses, but some of that I can't share with you, but I can share with you some of the anatomy and stuff that you can find on Google for yourself. So this is what we went over today. So last time we talked about the vertebrae, we talked about the anterior body, we talked about the posterior arch, and we talked about all the different parts of the vertebrae. But today we are going to talk about starting off with the facet joint. Alright, the facet joint, as you can see here, is also known as the zygapophyseal joint. And this helps to guide the movement in the spine. So, what it does is, or what it is it it's a joint. All right, definitely it's a joint. Seeing here, it connects. It's like ligaments connect the joints together, and it creates a capsule. And here's a posterior view of that. But interestingly, it kind of resembles the knee. So it is like a meniscus also, or a menisci. And this is it's lined with hyaline cartilage, and creates a capsule, and helps guide movements of the vertebrae. Interestingly, this is an innervated spot in the body, so it is innervated. You can feel pain here, and it does have nociceptors, so it is important for proprioception, has nerve endings. Yeah, it is innervated. So that is the facet joint, or the zygapophyseal joint. Now, we also spoke about the intervertebral, or the vertebral foramen. All right, we'll get to the intervertebral in a minute. But the anterior body combines with the posterior arch and creates the intervertebral foramen. And this is where the main canal, or the spinal canal as we know it. But there's also the intervertebral foramen. which runs perpendicular to the vertebral foramen, and it's at each FSU, or each functional spinal unit, where you have the vertebrae, disc, and the vertebrae. And spinal cord runs up and down, and the intervertebral, the parts where the spinal cord branches out, like you can see here, that runs transverse or perpendicular to the spinal cord. So it's very important that you keep this the spinal cord free of any kinks, and that whenever you do have pain, that it's like you might have an impingement in your spinal cord, all right, or one of those nerves near that area. And you gotta make sure to look at that, all right. But going on, that's the intervertebral foramen. So next, what we have is the annulus fibrosus and the nucleus pulposus. So the nucleus pulposus is this central portion here, all right. I just went to that picture, but the central portion here is the nucleus pulposus, and then you have the annulus fibrosus surrounding it. That both of those parts form the intervertebral disc, okay, or the discs as we know them. All right. Now, interestingly, the nucleus pulposus is kind of like a ball. All right, it's like a ball, and it's mainly water. And yeah, it's mostly water, and it's like a ball here. And then you have the annulus fibrosus, which the fibers of the annulus fibrosus, all right, they are very interesting. Look at this. They are oblique, and they are opposite. So the layer, like if one of my first layer runs right to left, then that next layer inside runs left to right, and they crisscross, and they create a lattice pattern. So whenever, going back to the nucleus, whenever you're in flexion, if you get up and you bend over right now, the nucleus will go towards the opening, so it will go posteriorly, all right, because the anterior is bending over, it's going into flexion, and so the nucleus will go towards the back, the posterior, dorsal. And vice versa, if you go into extension, then the nucleus runs anteriorly, or ventral. So next, even if you side bend, it'll go towards if you side bend to the left, the nucleus goes towards the right, and if you side bend to the right, nucleus goes towards the left. And that's for all of your discs, not just one. Like, that's whenever you side bend, all of them are moving to the left. All right, your L4, L5, your L5, S1, your L1, L2. There are all the way up to your whichever, all the way up to C1, C2. They're all bending, and they're all moving to the left. So whenever you twist, whenever you if you get up and you rotate, and you turn to your right and to your left, or you sit in your chair and you turn to your right and you turn to your left, you are twisting because of those oblique fibers in the annulus fibrosus. The nucleus isn't going anywhere. It's not going to the open part, so it's getting compressed whenever you twist. It's compressing down, and you're further deteriorating that nucleus because it's just getting compressed. And so most of the time, like, a rotation movement could it would make sense that if you hurt your back doing a rotation, then or if you hurt your back, then a rotation might have been the cause, because of the compression on the nucleus and ultimately the disc. So moving on. Next, we have the ligaments of the spine. All right, so the ligaments of the spine run all the way up and down the spine. All right, this is from the top to the bottom. So where is that one picture? Oh, here. We'll start with this picture. So you have the anterior longitudinal ligament. All right. Go in here. You have the anterior longitudinal ligament, which is on the inside most, or the most anterior to the anterior body. All right, anterior ligament, the ALL. And then you have the PLL, which runs on the back of the anterior body. All right, then you have the flavum, the ligamentum flavum, which connects your lamina together. You have the interspinal ligament, which connects the bodies of the spinous processes together. And then you have the supraspinous ligament, which is the most dorsal, and it connects the tips, or the dorsal portions of the spinous processes together. So with that, the ligaments, all right, are bone to bone, all right, and they form capsules sometimes, and but they connect bone to bone, and they reinforce the structure of the spine. So they keep it, they help keep the spine structurally together. And then they also assist in dynamic movement. So if you are an athlete and you hurt a ligament, for example, you roll your ankle and you hurt one of the ligaments in your foot, or you break your, or you tear your ACL or your MCL, if it's not properly rehabbed, it's not going to be as dynamic as it was before you injured it. So it's not going to have that spring as much. So you have to ensure you have proper rehab, because that scar tissue will build up and you won't be as dynamic as before. So it's important to not damage your ligaments in the first place, but if you do, then make sure that you rehab it properly, or else you're not going to have the same spring as you did before. So you have the ALL, anterior longitudinal ligament, posterior longitudinal ligament, PLL. You have the ligamentum flavum, you have the supraspinous ligament, you have the interspinous ligament, and you also have the intertransverse ligament, which runs on the transverse processes here. Okay, and they connect the transverse processes together. And they all these ligaments help keep the spine upright. They help keep it mobile and bendable, and a functional structure. So within the spine, all right, within the spine, all right, we have the vertebral foramen. Okay, remember the where the spinal cord goes through? That is also, that's also where the spinal cord goes through. And the spinal cord is connected to the brain. Okay, so if your spine's out of whack, then maybe it could affect your spinal cord, and it could affect your brain. All right, and it could affect the intervertebral foramen, where the spinal cord processes come out and go into the body. So one thing could lead to another. Okay, so in the spinal cord and in the brain, you have the meninges, and the meninges are what cover the spinal cord and protect it. And the outermost meninge is the dura mater, and the dura mater in Latin translates to tough mother. It is the outermost layer and is the toughest layer of the meninges. And within the spinal cord, all right, within the spinal cord and within the brain, you have cerebrospinal fluid. Now, with the cerebrospinal fluid, it is a clear, colorless liquid that is pumped throughout the brain and the spinal cord. And a buildup of this cerebrospinal fluid in any point of the spinal cord or its processes that branches or in the brain, a buildup of that could lead to kinks, and it could lead to compression of the ventricles. It could lead to blood vessels in the brain being compressed. It could lead to soft nerve tissue damage, which would be very bad. And it's just very important that if you have a back pain, then it gets addressed as soon as possible, because over time it could deteriorate into something more, and it could affect your spinal cord, it could affect your CSF, and it could affect different limbs and organs within your body. And so all this is connected. All right, everything is connected. Everything, if one thing hurts, then it's possible that another thing might hurt, and just being sure to look at all. Okay, so with the CSF, that brings us to something called the primary respiratory movement. Okay, so this also brings into the cranium, which we haven't touched on yet, but just because we mentioned CSF, we're going to talk about this. So the primary respiratory movement. All right, whenever it's the pumping of the CSF throughout the body, and it also relates to the sutures here in the skull. Now, the sutures here are the primary respiratory movement is states that the sutures actually have a design of motion, so that there's like a moving like this rhythmic motion within the brain and the spinal cord, and what fluctuates the spinal fluid, and talks about the movement of the cranium, like the cranial articular surfaces. Okay, so that's something to dive into that we'll eventually get into. But that's just to touch on this, just because we mentioned the cerebrospinal fluid. So next, so on your spine, or over time, your movement is limited by the elasticity and the thickness of the discs. So if your discs aren't getting our discs aren't getting any thicker. All right, they're always going to be deteriorating, and we have to make sure that they're as healthy as possible. But over time, the thickness of the discs deteriorate, and the elasticity of them deteriorate. Your movement's also limited by the shape and orientation of your facets, or the zygapophyseal joints. The tension in those facets, the tension in those joints, it can also affect your movement. and then the resistance of your back muscles and the ligaments of your back. All right, can all be causes of what's limiting your movement in the spine. Okay, so to circle back to the annulus fibrosis and the discs. So whenever you sleep, or whenever we sleep, um, gravity, whenever we get up, gravity's always pushing down on us. All right, gravity is pushing down and it's compressing our discs. All right, it's compressing our nucleus and our nuclei and our annuli. Okay, but whenever we sleep and we lay down, gravity is actually helping to stretch out our back and to create space, or to help like water get back into the nucleus and the annulus, and well, the nucleus specifically, because the annulus is mostly collagen fibers. So specifically the nucleus. So whenever we lay down, water helps, or that helps water get back into the nucleus and rehydrate the disc. And if there's a with age and with trauma, the water that like the amount of water that our nucleus can withhold goes down, and that's just how it is. We're built to we're always like, we're getting older, so we have to make sure that we're getting enough water, that we're getting enough sleep so that our discs can rehydrate. Enough water, enough sleep, and stretching to keep the spine mobile and the facets in less tension. And yes, so water is big. And water, to touch on water, what we learned today is that from food and beverages. All right, if you say, "Oh, I drink my Diet Coke, I drink my I have my my vegetables, and I get enough water from my vegetables," well, your body has to extract that water first before it can use it. All right, and it's just not as efficient as drinking straight up water, because whenever we drink water straight up, it's transported immediately to where it needs to go in our body, into our discs, into our um, organs, and into our bloodstream, into our body. All right, so water, get your sleep, so it resets helps get the nucleus rehydrated, and yes. So last couple things here to touch on. So we went into some of the erector spinae. All right, some of the erector spinae. So there's three, but they each have three different subcategories. So you have your longissimus, you have the spinalis, and you have the iliocostalis. All right, now the iliocostalis has the iliocostalis lumborum, thoracus, cervicus, the cervicis. Then you have the longissimus, which is thoracus, cervicis, and the capitis. And then you have the spinalis, which is the smallest and most medial in the spine, and which is thoracus, cervicis, and capitis. Okay, so something interesting I saw in the anatomy is just where they're all originating and inserting into. And they're all like, they're not just on the spinous processes, but they're also on the transverse processes. They're also on the ribs. So whenever, like, the erector spinae aren't just on the spine. They're on the ribs as well. And I just thought that was very, very interesting to see. And there's another picture here too that kind of shows that they're not just posteriorly attached. You can kind of see it in that one picture I have right now. But they're not just posteriorly attached. They're attached interiorly as well, or anteriorly as well, which is just very interesting. And so that could affect how it contracts, how it moves, and yeah. So I mean, we'll get more into that today. I touched on that in my study today. Also is the trapezius. So the trapezius originates from the occipital, and it goes all the way down to T12, and it inserts into the spine of the scapula. So it helps to move the scapula in different planes. So move the scap down, move it, retract the scapula downwards or directly like transverse, and then also some movement up. Alright, so I feel like when we do shrugs, or whenever people do shrugs, they say, oh, it's traps, oh, I'm working my traps, which you are, but you're also working your levator scap, which I think is the primary muscle that you're working in a shrug, which is literally, look at this, it attaches onto the spine, onto the scapula, not on the spine of the scapula, but attaches onto the scapula here, and it goes up. The fibers are up. All right, and yeah, that's kind of what you're training when you shrug. All right, your trapezius is a supporting muscle, but I don't think that is the agonist muscle. Lastly, for today is the latissimus dorsi. So with the latissimus dorsi, it is the broadest muscle of the back, and it's responsible for abduction of the humerus and internal rotation of the humerus, and it's also a powerful rotator of the trunk. So with this, trying to see that IR, the internal rotation here, you can see the ADD of the humerus, because I mean, a pull-up, you're adducting the humerus towards your body, you're pulling the humerus towards your body in a pull-up or a chin-up, but also in a row, you're ADDing your humerus to your body, you're adducting your humerus to your body. But the component of internal rotation is from, you can see it kind of in this picture here, how the fibers kind of run up, but they twist into the humerus. So they're not just responsible for ADD, they have a twisting element, and then they attach into the humerus. So to get a full stretch of the lats, you have to be in ABD, and you have to be in ABD, or a full contraction of the lats. You have to be in ADD and IR, a little bit of IR in the humerus. So I thought that was very interesting today in study. But yeah, there's always more stuff to learn. We're going to be making some more videos too, talking about it, and just getting to know the anatomy and physiology and how our body works. But that was it for today. I wrote some questions down here that I want to dive deeper into. Maybe I'll make a video about that sometime soon. But anyways, guys, wish me luck on the car. Hopefully that goes well.